From the heart of the Saviour of 100 deities of Dashita, on the peak of a cloud resembling a clump of extremely white fresh curd, King of Dharma, Omniscient, Losandrapa, please come here together with your sons. In the sky before me, on a lion throne, lotus and moon, my perfect pure Guru smiles with delight. Supreme field of merit for my mind of faith, please abide for 100 eons to spread the teachings. Your holy mind has the intelligence that understands the full extent of objects to be known. Your holy speech with its excellent explanations is an ear ornament of those of good fortune. Your holy body is radiantly beautiful with glory and renown. To you who are meaningful to see, hear, and remember, I prostrate. Pleasing drinking water, various flowers, fragrant incenses, lights, scented waters, and so forth. Oceans of cloud-like offerings, both actually arranged and mentally emanated. I offer to you the supreme field of merit. Whatever non-virtue of body, speech, or mind, especially those opposite to the three vows that I have collected from beginningless time, I confess each and every one with fervent regret from my heart. You strove for much learning and practice in this degenerate age, and made your freedoms and riches as meaningful. By abandoning the 8 worldly concerns, Saviour, we sincerely rejoice in your extensive deeds. Perfect, pure, holy Gurus in the billowing clouds of wisdom and compassion in the sky of the Dharmakaya, please let fall a rain of profoundly extensive Dharma upon the receptacle of those to be subdued exactly as they need. May whatever virtue I have collected benefit the teachings and all transmigratory beings, and in particular may it cause the essence of perfect pure Losandropa's teachings to shine forever. Saji Pogi Joshi Meto Trahari Rabling Nide Gampadi Sange Shindu Meteoa Yidro Kunanda Jila Chopasho. By the merits of having offered this mandala to Lama Tsongkhapa and his two, may I, my family members, and all be able to meet, practice, and actualize the teaching victorious one, Losang Drapa, who had the morality of an eminently pure way of life, was courageous in the extensive conduct of the sons of the victorious ones, and accomplished the yoga of the 2 stages supreme bliss and emptiness. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamne. By the force of having fervently requested in this way, hollow beams of white are emitted from the hearts of the perfect pure father and sons, and combining into one, enter my crown. White nectar, the color of milk, flows through the opening a tube of white light, cleansing all my sicknesses, spirit harms, negative karmas, obscurations, and their imprints without exception. My body becomes as pure and clear as crystal. So reciting 3 times that Mixema mantra, 5-line prayer, page 13. Me me te we te che chen re si, tri me kem pa wan pa champaya, do pu ma lu jan san sa wa dan, gan chen ke ben sun gan sun ka pa, lo san tra pe shabla so wa de. Me me te we te che chen re si, tri me kem pa wan pa champaya, do pu ma lu jan san sa wa dan, gan chen ke ben sun gan lo san. Okay, tracks of last so sorry. Me me te we te te chen re si, dream make and pa one pa shampaya. Do pu ma lu jan san ta wa dan, gan chen ke ben sun gan sun kapa. No san dra be shabla so And now the swift return prayer for Kabja Lama Zopa Rinpoche by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Peerless teacher and assembly of the children of the victorious ones, Shravakas and Pradika Buddhas, victorious Losang, father and sons, along with the lineage masters, all the objects of refuge of infinite lands, please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now, holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teaching through explanation and practice. You wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable, venerable Guru, to you I make request. While striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teaching, sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness and from other living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. What a great loss. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean of the three jewels and the great waves of bodhicitta of the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples.
Sanji Chedong Tsojin Chonum La Changju Pardu Dang Jiaosun Dagi Chushi Jebang Dagi Dralam Bench Sanjin Drubar Sho Sanji Chedong Tsojin Chonum La Changju Pardu Dang Jiaosun Dagi Chushi Jebang Dagi Dralam Bench Sanjin Drubar Sho Sanji Chedang Tsojin Chonum La Changchu Pardu Dang Kyabsun Dagi Chushi Jebang Dag Drolam Benshi Sanjin Drubar Sho Kangi Tukzi Nizoni Tawa Tamji Bambi Cher Tambi Chun Dunze Kwadam De La Changze Lo Namo Laye Kedan Lada Najangi Tripong Dada Mi Kenam Dan Ro Kunji Danam Chizamba Tamje Kedu Dagi Chuden Do. Good morning, everyone. Hanzo Gendenge Sapasang Shoki. Zendati Gotsugero, Sra.
So we'll begin our Friday morning class.
The mixing Chancelaya current sugar yanara. Current Gogia Nangihako Mundos.
So Geshe doesn't know exactly what to share with you, what you exactly did.
Naningima, Kazingima, and some the Lamrum drink it some jury, the tinny, and it's so pizza. Thing is in Shined Tang Court. Shined Tang Court, the Mang Xiaondi, and a chamber, chamber court, two loss, chamber court.
So previously on our middling stages of the movement, we left off at the place where we were discussing about concentration in the context of the abiding presentation. So in particular, we're discussing about mindfulness or recollection.
There is the Chitangi chamber the massive kitchen book. Sungudu Sra, and the chamber kitchen book. Tinani Benata chamber Nisha said, and the chamber Nisha gom said. The Tenson Zambalina Tona Shu Chigoras, Chamanisha Gom Kolia, and the Betona Chigoras. The Chamanisha Gom Kor Shiondi Tendugita, and the Chamanisha Gom Chiltanchi Yunguri, and it ma the Sugin Senamandu, Mungo, the Jagar Kibik Shon on the Chamanisha Sondanchik. And mean the chiver dane, tenda des chi manda dochi, Yungio Saris.
So in general, we can understand that mindfulness is actually something that is very important. So likewise, when we consider about the practices in general, the practices such as love and compassion, we can understand that mindfulness and meditation are actually very important in the same way. So in general, we can say that these days in our world, there's become a great interest about the practice of mindfulness. So we can understand that these practices can be found from the Indian-based philosophies. So even though they do have the same name, mindfulness, but the perspective that we're approaching it from has got a different purpose. So that.
들다 진짜 당저 전반 2월 시작봤을 나온디 전반 2월 시작봤어 아니 간지 아니 전발에야 시하고 그랬어야지 전발에야 가두는 아니 전발에 송고 그랬어야지 아니 니차고 그랬어 전반 2월 시작봤으나 전발에 송고 그랬어야지 전발에 메나 로 샘라 메나 아니 자와카리나 제 마싱이 차도 걸어서 샘라 여바이나 아니 더디니 시그니 아니 삼론 교타이라 소바 더디 용구여로서 인자 템바니어 샤야디 아니 템바니샤 세디 기쳔부 디 토니 용구여서리스로
So, what happened here? Oh, sorry. Okay, so where we're holding mindfulness, so practicing the mindfulness recollection, it's important to make sure that that is being held within one's own mind, yeah? So without this practice of mindfulness, or the practice without one's intention, then whatever actions that we are putting into practice are going to become undirected or be rendered somewhat unuseful, yeah? So the purpose of implementing our mindfulness in this context is in order to transform our mental, our thinking and our thoughts and mental capacity, yeah? So this is why it's very important to practice mindfulness in order to hold our intentions. Yes.
들다 더 템벌 샤야디 카르레스 로 템벌 샤야디 야다 아니 계체 좀더 마서나 아니 릭마무페 용거여라스 라간주 니기 통조다 암조 고야다 지 아니 참말로 아니 템벌이 냐데 바이나 아니 간주 샘 투야기 닌가 여러와스 라 참말로 지 내주 가르쳐서 참말로 추즈베 아니 디토라 연장이 삼물당 대바이나 아니 가고랑 간주 샘 마기바 용야기 닌가 여러와스
So what is mindfulness, or what is this recollection? Yeah. So mindfulness is coming to allowing ourselves to pay attention to those external objects. So, but if we allow our awareness to go to those external objects, but without this capacity of mindfulness, then there is a real danger of your mind becoming disturbed and increasing one's own mental unhappiness.
베나 당한주 망체디 라 간주 미망체디 지당 미치 계당친 저거라서 피기다 소수게 로바지기냠 메시디 미지기 냠도 라 메시기는 도그라스 라 다지 근데 타와타장 로진나 아니 소수직보 대해지 소수직보 대 소수 칼라 소수사 비기 티첸다 로존 첸드니 지금 메셴발라 펜톤 토르 마톤 소수직보 로데지 요러스 디 마이나 아니 미지기 냠도 메시기는 도그라스 라 다 미지기 냠도 메시기는 도온디 미니 차용 거래 미니 차온디 삼로 만도 일레그라스 삼로 만도 일레디게 아니 텔레템비게 남규 만도 레그레 케체시다 만도 레그레 소소다 민tum비게 아니 지 아니 남규 마부지 통용 거라서라 다 민tum비게 페나 소소는 데바메비 페나 식지 라바이나 디 식디 크응알지 독자지 랍송서서 어느 크응알지 켄자지 랍송서서 식디 페나 템발이야 마부 냐데바이나 로봇 디다 문tum바 조야기 규차시기로스라 디 아니 템바 니버샤시기 템발이야 냐야기 아니 단다디 레몬도스 페나 디다워디 템발이 냐야디 레몬도스
Like, for example, mostly within our daily lives, where we are in a relationship with friends or family, we're always together with another person. So there are some situations where we do stay by ourselves, where we just go about making our daily food. We might reflect and we might study. But if this is not the situation, then more likely than not, we will be with or in the presence of another person. And in that situation, then there's going to be instances where there'll be different ways of thinking coming about due to there being two different people present. So there'll be different ways of speaking and different ways of thinking and of different opinions. So this is an experience that we can easily understand, isn't it? So in this case, there is the possibility of you saying or the other person saying something harshly or in the way that you dislike. Yeah. So, but if we use the practice of mindfulness, then we can be aware and then we can have a more strong possibility of being able to remain in a very harmonious way with that other person. But in this context, the use of mindfulness in this way, in our context, we do not use mindfulness in that way. So.
pena da tindri kawla ta temple khari nyago res laundi temple nyaya di minni inza samlo ni yobanza samlo mando ni yobanza samlo di mando ni yobadi ngazu semle nyago das samlo mando ni yobadi ngada khoni samlo chiba chikyam da mahimbadi sosu semle nyago yati kechimbu isares pena ko pure nga phomore sambige ro tinza ko rangshin ge suzu lunkham ge bi lutdang khorang thone ani shikha mandawa da namgyur mandawa da samlo mandawa yobadi semle nyawa ina ani keche khasda namgyur mandawa thayong bi khabdula di yong chogre di ko mandawa re sambige samlo de suzu semle yoderwas tinza karib muntumba lebayna muntumba dige big namgyum muntumba ani keje shedam mundawa ani chedam mundawa di thoni ani sosoda ganda drog mares ganda hagode ganda drog ganda mandro ya jase jatam pentogres ko ni muntumba re ko muntumba di yungro ko yung choya jira samyagi ani 가서 소수기 아니 당랑로디 당도 렌투야기 자기는 누구였어레스
So here we have what is the difference between having these two people present. So when we recall or rely on mindfulness, whenever there are two different types of people, there's always going to be two different types of thought processes. Yeah. So it's really up to us to keep in our own minds the possibility of the differences coming about, two different types of thoughts or processes of thoughts. So even though these two types of thoughts are not the same, actually, it's very important to keep these two opinions in mind. And that is okay to have those two different opinions in our own minds that we think of, yeah. So for example, based on the female and male, or women and men, we have different personalities based on being male or female, yeah. This is very natural. So then naturally, we can see that there's going to be differences in facial expressions and personality and behavior, and that is fine. But even that different way or incongruent ways of thinking, it's okay to have that and reflect about that. So you can see that even though there's two different ways of thinking, these two ways of thinking don't necessarily have to be contradictory or black and white in your own mind. So we can on a voluntary level, we can actually reflect about these two different ways of minds and actions. That's all.
There's the wrong answer. Missing on the Ganga Manshu di Mancham Chambu Mevitoni, Mancham Bitoni, Ganga Legor, Ganga Legoras, Ganga Tegora. The Mancham Yai Jujan so jig Muntumba inza, Muntumbi wank, Geshe Tsultrim, Tawa Muntumba, and it can come Mandava, a dinty Tony, and it Chichila Magawa Lokia di Yunguyoras. The Diko Pig Zavi Tudan Korang Tony, come Minza, and then Sam Mando in yours, and then Lunkum Gay, Kamian Dragamares. Dinty to go Yong Choyaji, Yong Yaji Yimbadi, Temple Gundeng Temple Yatuana, Gundeng Temple Yatuana, and Kangan Teadi, Yunga Yungosaris.
So you can see in our everyday lives that problems are arising on the basis of these discordant relationships. So we develop a disliking and a feeling of unfriendliness towards other people that may have a difference of opinion. But wherever there's going to be, different people, two or more people, there's going to be different ways of thinking, two minds, yeah? So on this basis, we're actually experiencing a lot more problems. We can understand this in our daily lives. But if we're able to hold mindfulness within our own mind when these situations arise, then those problems arising from that disharmony will be reduced.
Dinanjigida Samlay Nyagoyadi Mi Shembagi any Samlo Tanda Karimba, Shika Karimba, and the Meba Karimba, the Soba Di Pa Shini, and Hakoni Di Tembale Nyagoya. And he Sozu Lega Karichebaina, then Anzu Lega Karichina, Mi Shen Dun Legacy Gugudasra. And Anzu Churchina. Militun Legacheresha, Che Machena, and Mitzi Tonishena, Mission la Dun Rogo Dasra. The Mission la Tuya, Mission Tusagi Midigi, come the nervous, any Jig Samlo Tandala Soba, Ding and Zugu, Gulun Chegoyadi, 아니 간주 미진을 기침부배 차고래서 추쇼 돈을 신나 기침을 차고래 추쇼 돈을 계속 마셔봐이나 기침을 차고래서 이제 딘지 닐루디 아니 소수 귤런지 하고 왔지 디 템벌에 냐야디 디 템벌에 냐야디 또 최도 최마이 뭐 가릭 돈을 시야봐이나 빼마서 기침을 차고래서
If we can keep in mind this mindfulness, if we keep in mind the other ways of thinking that another person may have, we can think about they have a difference in personality, their preferences, and so on. If we keep this in our own mind, then we'll be experiencing a lot less problems. So even in our daily lives or any actions or work that we're engaging in, if we recall this mindfulness, it'll be a lot more beneficial. And even from the perspective of, from a Dharma perspective, any practices or any actions that we are engaging in relation to a Buddhist context or the Dharma context, then relying on this mindfulness will be very useful. So then this is why it's very important to keep mindfulness in our mind as we are going about our daily lives. So.
일단 간주 람름 셰고레다 람름 기셰야 조디 조디 잔주샘레스 잔주샘세 잔주샘 미유디 셴데레다스라 람데 마레 셴데레스 더 셴기 된다 가리임바디 셴기 샘감당 툼비토니 셴기 된다 두고야 데레다스라 대상 간주 템발라 소야디 셴덴데다 다 단지등이 다 벤슨 쳔발에 냐에 땅그 벤슨로다 당 원내기 람람 거 템바니샤키 쳔발에 소야디 셴덴데레스 다 셴덴데레스라
That's left. So here we're speaking in the context of the Lamrim, or the graduated stages to enlightenment. And the Lamrim is mainly focused on the mind that is striving for enlightenment, or the mind of enlightenment. So the mind of enlightenment is for others, for the sake of others. So it's not for the sake of one's own purpose, but it's for the sake of others. So this needs to be in accord with others. So when we speak of the actual practice in relation to the Lamrim, when we put mindfulness into practice, then that is going to be in relation for the benefit or for the sake of others.
다디 디 람름 기갑기 람름 장애지기 삼다야 개체슈디 셴데레라 간주 미징은 삼당 바이나야 아니 자와 개체슈디 아니 셴덴 차가요레스 라다디 간주 다 리비 두고라다 개체슈디 셴덴 바디 간주 미진자 미레슬라운디 화시 된고 미 체니소나 생기 아니 로와 셴레로 돈로 베단 따지 무슨을 소바 소차 비기 다 돈로를 소발레 아니 캐버도 파비 콘즈 마시야지 아니 마시바 아니 지 비기 안 렉바데 니비기 아니 넘버 jem 무퉁행기 돈로리 캐버도 파바 미지 반자 아니 개체와도 총아디 가리임바 삼노탄 퉁에 아니 개총아시하는 개체와디 줍 퉁행기 남주영행기 다 미지인자 아니 네버도 미지인자다 셴된 삼고야디 수수기 딱 갈수다 아니 레가도 차고래서 딱 돈조지기 바이나 그 돈조지 대한 돈조지네야 코랑 된다 헛다 받아치니 누구라서 당연히 델리 캐버도 봐와인자 아니 란된 쌈마인 바 셴된 쌈토야기 만줄에 니버지언자 니버도 때니 셴된 쌈고야디 아니 미 깨발렘비 고든 소질이야다 추는 시는 지요레스 아니 소수익 비 리비 돈이 잡아치나야 고든 조디 개체슈디 란다 셴이가나니 셴기 되인 바디 리비 두고레스
So here we have the labyrinth, so the graduated stages to enlightenment. And at this time, we're not necessarily thinking about in terms of the purpose or working for the sake of others. Yeah. So why is the fact that it is the most important action or activity is working for the sake of others? Yeah. So we can establish this and we can look at it within a logical fashion. Yeah. So as a human being, we are defined as being someone who is able to express and who is able to have discriminating awareness or intelligence. So this is what sets us apart from the animals who are, do have the ability to discriminate, but not at the same capacity as what humans do. Humans are able to distinguish between what is good and what is bad and make other various distinctions. So in whatever actions or whatever works that a human is engaging in, then we can make that and we can determine that we can to work for that benefit of others, for the purpose of others. Whereas from a perspective of the animals, then they do their best to work for the benefit, but it's not really for the benefit of others, yeah, in the same way that the human has that same capacity. So our main purpose is the purpose for helping others, yeah. So when we think about these in terms of the two of helping oneself and helping others, then we can establish in a logical fashion the great importance of helping others. Yes, you know.
데다 다 셴든 기침부 임바디 템벌에 샤야라야 셴든 기침부 임바디 소르트고 그러스다로 먼저 아니 셴든 기침부 임바디 셈나와라야 아니 소르트고 그러다 디 용야라야 아니 sam당고 그러스라 셴다 람다 셴슬라원디게 셴디 기침부 임바디 다 균세 mambu 토네 라 아니 당 홍그 베나 아니 야가르 케베게 벤루춥된로 소바 한 장관하고 정거발 첨벌로 소비겠다 오늘 남주 풀도 좀 끼우도서 가리 간다시 셴된디 람된리 셴된 케치바 이버 두두 다 딘지 토라야 로존치네 삼로 땅바이나 아니 셴된디 케치모 임바 랑리 셴 디갸차 갸탐바 케치모 임바디 아니 몬섬도 통용해야지 연구열에서라 딜레바이나 가디나 셴디 케치모 임바디 템발레 냐도 그랬어 템발레 샤도 그랬어 템번 예와 샤바디 연구했어라.
So where we see that the purpose is to be of benefit to others, that we can use the practice of mindfulness to that ends. We can use that as a means to benefit others. So on this basis, we need to develop a feeling that the mindfulness needs to be established. We need to develop an understanding about why mindfulness needs to be established. Yeah. So we can cultivate that feeling on the basis of some logical reasoning. Yeah. So many great scholars, such as the 17 Nalanda scholars and the great Master Lama Tsongkhapa, many great beings who are very well studied and very learned were able to develop and finally see directly the benefits of cultivating mindfulness. And so we'll be able to see the use of implementing mindfulness in our own lives.
제가 간주기 나다 그러 더 삼단거 말나 마도 지 랑제반 지야디 마도베게 셴케 쳔보임바디 균딩기 samtangi yo marwas ra samla tambayna ani rang chian jiang ge rang thola samla tambayna sosula khang yobadi shenla teni jongja ba bashik ma do ani shenla ma de ba ani ngala ya khariyor ka khuji me bas ra ka khuji shenla ma de ba ji shenla teni ma chong aji ani ngala ya cheban jiang gi ani kan yo maris ra pena sosula yobita lu ra lu ni cheni shenba ba chala pha shasho ni chi ani gyupenjo da chi pha shan sosula yobi lu ni cheni shenla teni chongba jirawas tinza tinji gi samla tangbayna ani cheban jinggoya di shenre ma do rang ma imba ti yacha gyatamba ani semnala ya ra treji yungu yasares dang hungu kyewa tamba duzu ngone samlu shukchen mo tani ani cheba cheon digi konzu di nyeyorada konzu di ngonsum to cheni ani rangdun drubya di le tani jandun la zenya di legora jandun la zenya la teni ani ngombo zoba sangiya ge te legora sirwa ta nganzu di mashi wache rangda ngada ngas labche ani gyugyu nyege ani kangalan honde di jazgyada ma insare sirwa
We don't really have to even consider deeply where we think in terms of self and others, because it's very obvious when we think about the I all the time. This cherishing is always directed towards the I or the self, yeah? So we don't need to think very deeply to understand that, yeah? But when we think in terms of the reality, then the other cherishing makes a lot more sense, because depending on others only is the fact that we actually experience any sort of comfort or my pleasure, yeah. So dependent on others, then we're depending on others, yeah. Whereas we actually don't depend on the self at all in any way. So, for example, if we take our own body, putting aside thinking about gaining resources or objects or other works or activities, if we just think about only our body, we gain our body solely independent on others. Yeah. So in this way, we can easily understand that the cherishing of others is actually much more logical rather than cherishing our oneself alone. So it's very, in this way, it's very easy to be proved. So great masters, such as Amazon Kappa and so forth, have thought very deeply about this notion of cherishing others due to the fact that we rely so heavily on them. And these great masters have actually realized this directly, and even to the point where they've got this conviction that they would even give up or abandon their own welfare, and they work solely for the purpose of others, to the point where they work for becoming enlightened, fully enlightened Buddhas, in order for the sake or the purpose of all sentient beings. So even if they did experience problems, they would still do it or engage in it for the sake of others. So.
dinjigi nenga chewi ro nelu ngotongindi dinjigi nenga chengi nelu ngotongindi ani sanji jomden di koncha goras ro tinza ta nganzu ani lamram lojong chegi yore nangju chegi yore nangju chewandi nangju chengi jingwani ani dinjigi nelu ngotongindi temba sanji jomden di soso ranyela ya ngone nelu lamdengi ani lamden nangi tempo khora nyakchi yin samsam gi tempo di nganzu kabu nganzu semla nyagwa ya diresha siro sanji chomden di rani la ya ngone neluk tengin gi tempo khora yin samsam gi semna la ya tempo nang la ya yonggu du tempo la nyagwa du siro
So here we think about the experiencing the situation that we are in at the present. We're looking at studying the graduated stages to enlightenment. We're studying Buddhism in general. Yeah? So the Buddha taught these teachings in the frame or the context of teaching the reality, just teaching how things actually exist, the way things are. So when we recall those teachings of the Buddha Shakyamuni, then we can keep this, or we can recall that he taught about the true nature of reality, how things actually exist. So this is what we can be mindful about, or we can recollect, yeah, and keep that within our minds.
sanji chomden di sosu rani la ya lamden nangin gi temba ta gegen chodu kyowa gegen ko yin samsam gi temba jigyo na ane sosu di gedu yin samsam gi temba gyawar muji kadin songora sanji chomden di ta gedu yin samsam gi ro ani di yusong ay nangshin gi ngaran soya rani sanji chomden di ta ngone gedu yin samsam gi temba jigyo ba na 아니 게투기 게긴 칼 냥고야디 게투기 랭겐 쪼로스라 대한 템발을 내기로스라 딜레바이나 산점된디 강 람된 나샤바디 아니 소수기 아니 롭종 체고야기 롬생 기체슈지 임바디야 템발 용그레스 딜레바이나 더 균댕기 산지 강 람된 나와디 아니 롭종 체야기 dum바다 아니 메바다 슉 딘딜레사라스라 더 딜레바이나 더 로종디 아니 더 가디나 로종 체토야치 냠린 체토야치 딜레바나 간 냠슬람비 유치디 템발라야 템부친 데야치 로 가디나 마토라치 아니 디용구요사레스
So if we recall or if we are mindful that the Buddha Shakyamuni was the supreme teacher that showed the actual reality, then as a student, we can use mindfulness or recollection to keep that quality within our minds. Yeah. So His Holiness the Dalai Lama regularly says that I am the student of the Buddha Shakyamuni. So in the same way that we can recall that we are the students or the followers of the Buddha Shakyamuni, we can use mindfulness and or recollection. So this is the responsibility of us being the student. Yeah. So we, as we are engaging in our studies, reflection, and practices, then if we have this recollection and mindfulness within our own minds or our hearts, then there'll be a great feeling of enthusiasm and wanting to engage in our studies and practices. And on the basis of this mindfulness and recollection, then we'll be able to practice in a very stable manner and be able to study in a very stable manner. So on this basis, or by using mindfulness and recollection, this stability will arise. That's it.
다 산지 가리 람된 나와 가리 비게 아니 랍산 나샤와 디레 롭종 치니 디 템발 여바이마 디 템발 가주스기 아니 에 가서다 냐투바이나 다딜 딜로종 디레스 다 람람 로종 뭐마디 that things are is that the temple kazu shuk chembu jiyo ba na ani sosu sem di pigi pena pena denshi la ya ani lojong jin ba na ani sem la ya denshi nilu di tembi yu la ya sibu jiyo ba na ani sosu sem di demba shila ya te tu gores demba shila deni ro denshi gi ani ta denshi gi nyamne la pa ani sem di jar tu gores ro.
So if we recall the advice and the teachings as a student, using our mindfulness, recollection, and commit them to memory, then this is what we can understand as the actual studies. Yeah. So in particular, when we're talking in the context of the Lam Rim or the graduated stages to enlightenment, then we can use our recollection to hold those teachings within our own minds. Yeah. So, however strongly we have this recollection or committed to our memory, for example, when we're studying about the Four Noble Truths, for example, so if we have a clear understanding of the meaning or the content of those Four Noble Truths, then we're able to, by using our recollection and mindfulness, we're able to hold our attention and have that remain there on the content of the Four Noble Truths. And using this recollection, then we can actually put into practice the essence of what the Four Noble Truths are describing, and we can let that be affixed to one's mind, which means it can be utilized and implemented in transforming one's own mind. That's all.
Terda nganzu semdi yul chamu demba shilaya kazu suki sem ani te tuba di tsugi yul rakpa pena chakdang kisa ki yulaya sem droya di nyong dogres ro chakdang kisa ki yulaya sem droya di nyong di chakdang lo di ranshin ki nyong dogres ta di komdi kazu suki kombachi tuba di tsugi ani semlaya chakdang lo di nyong dogres kanji ani bigi lo rakpa ro ani ji nganzu tsendi ji zugda zuru rejala soba chakbi lo di ani lo di nyong dogres di kazu nyong doga di tsugi lo rakpa nyong doga di tsugi lo chamu yul chamu demba sheda ji tomba nila soba dendri laya tebi lo di ani shuk ser dogres ro.
So, as we are looking to investigate and better clearly understand the more subtle topics, then by using mindfulness and recollection, so the more that we use this mindfulness and recollection, the less strong, the grosser or the coarser levels of mind will be arising, such as the coarser levels of attachment and anger in relation to those sensual objects of the ear, eye, nose consciousness. Those are a base or a coarse level of objects. Yeah. So so if we use the mindfulness and the recollection to reduce those coarser levels of looking to those sensory objects, then the most subtle objects, when we are thinking or reflecting about the Four Noble Truths and so forth, then an understanding on those were becoming a lot more clearer. That's it.
Terda nganzu 로 rakba segurda lo rakba sem rakba sena yur rakba le tebi ge semdi sem rakba chagores bena surda tu rejala soba sindi ndoyan la soba sindi jigara da ji ani nyen nyen de la soba dindi le chagbi lo rakba khaju su ge shukcheba di sogi lo tamodi ya shukda mason le tuguyo mares pena nganzu tsen la ya dawagi we shuk chenbu yobayna karma we 통구문도 아세라 아니 다वे 왜 매바이나 다와 매바이나 karma the sibu shuji karma we 통구도 아세 디난신기 샘 락바디 팡 가투바이나 샘 락바디 로 착당 락비 로드방 가투바이나 아니 샘 참무 아니 율 참무 통행기 샘디 아니 ngondu kyurgo waresra da sem chamo di ngondu kyurbaina denshi la soba tombani la soba la migbi sem chamo di ngondu kyurchini ani kewa jebaina kewa chimala drobaina da ngone di pengo wares
Kewa jeba.
kewa chima
Mixegi kewa jeba.
la
Mixegi kewa jeba.
mixi kewa chima yes
That's it. Hento yore.
re
That's it. So a cause or a growth mind is actually dependent or generated on the objects that is actually apprehending. Yeah. So in the case of the sense consciousnesses, then if it's sound, smell, taste, and so on, these are all gross or cause objects. So when a mind apprehends a gross object, then that mind also becomes a gross or cause mind. So in the same way, if a mind that is a subtle mind, then is actually apprehending a subtle object. So when whenever there is a cause mind or a gross mind, and that is stronger, then at that time there's no place for a subtler mind to arise. Yeah. So however strong that cause mind is, then that much the subtler mind is going to be weaker. So for example, it's like when in the evening time, when the moon shines very brightly, and at that time, it's very difficult to see the starlight. But when there is no moonlight, then the starlight is very clear and vibrant. So in the same way, when there is the cause minds, to the grasping to those cause objects, then there's necessarily not going to be those subtle minds that are looking at that could be examining the vulnerable truths or emptinesses and so forth. So the purpose is to reduce those coarser levels of minds and allow those subtle levels of minds that are reflecting on the vulnerable truths and emptiness and so forth. And this will be of benefit for our future lives.
terda kanji sem tamodira anzu tsedile da mi luden tovni mi luden di ko drowa shen le lagbi lich ro ani kanji sem tamo pigita ani denshida tombanila sobada denginzila sobara ya ani ngol chetungengi lu kora luden mandrawa jinza lu ti tone anzu sem tamodi ya ani nganzu semle ya ngondu kyurtoyagi bezun chitubana ta dini ngoni kewani kewa gyuni nganzu churchiyagi nubadi legores ro tichimado na nganzu sem dagarang toni ani nganzu ugdiche kewa chimala chi rogo chona ani pemase wakale kabo ro kewa chima yangya milu lanyala sobada kewa chima yangya muntuni nganzu tsendele ya kansamlo tamadi muntuni samlo tansayadi shinduni kale kabo 차고를 들어
that this subtle mind is actually generated on the basis of our human body. Yeah. So our human body is really something that is better than other types of bodies that are able to be taken up. So we're able to utilize subtle minds that are reflecting on the Four Noble Truths, emptiness, concentration, and so forth. These things can be generated and reflected on by using our subtle mind within this human body. So on this basis, if we make effort and put into practice on this basis of the human body, we're able to transform our minds. So, and that'll be of benefit from life to life going into the future. But this human body, if we do not make that effort and put into practice to transform our own minds, then it is actually very difficult to continuously take up the human body in life to life going into the future. That's it.
다간지 도르드나 템바데레스라 템벨라야 템비율라야 페나 군조숨 템비율라야 가드이나 마제와치야 아니 덴시 네루 동반닐로 소비 네루 티디 다 가드이나 아니 템비율라 샤투바이나 내가 가르치나 칼라스나 드나 데나 가리나지 아니 가린 통과 가르 퇴바 가르 거바 참을로 바 아니지 덴시다 파 자르투바치 템벌 여바이나 아니 되니 가드이나 착당 글로디 야 님보대한테로 배준 믹스기 배준 매봐 아니 착당 글로야 랑신 뇌돼야지 간주 땐데 삼당 연구여서래서 템바 녀와 샤바 약부 지어봐나 배나 뎀바시디 템발에 녀와 샤바 약부 지어봐나 가드이나 아니 착당 수수 샘디 착당 글로야 님보줘돼야지 연구여서래서 다디 용예래 토마 덴시 니루디 장고 그러서라 산지 좀 된데 간다 송여바 디 장고 그러서 장이 양야 상로 담바나 덴시 원트야지 소지샘라야 덴바시 원트야지 용거라 다 원트야지 레잖아 데니 템발에 냐야디 레라 용거라서라 딘디 가야 맞잖아 아니 덴바시 템발에 냐고서나 간다시 냐고 냐싱 말어서라
So, in brief, we think about what mindfulness or recollection is. So, here is something that we do not want to forget. Yeah. So, if we do not have this mindfulness recollection, it's going to, that object, that subject is going to be forgotten. So, for example, if we think in terms of the content of the Four Noble Truths, if we recollect the content of the Four Noble Truths, then whatever activity that we are engaging in, such as eating, drinking, or going about our daily lives, or even whatever we see, hear, or and so on, that's going to be, we are going to have an understanding of those situations based on the Four Noble Truths presentation. So we can really use mindfulness of the Four Noble Truths presentation and use that as a remedy or an antidote to reduce those afflictive emotions such as attachment and anger. Yeah. And whenever they arise, we can use that mindfulness of the Four Noble Truths, for example, to reduce those disturbing emotions. So we need to, so in order for that to come about, we need to learn what the actual presentation of the Four Noble Truths is. And whatever the Buddha taught, we need to learn and we need to study about these things. So on the basis of this introduction, learning about the introduction of these fundamental topics, then we'll be able to recall them and use them. Whereas if we don't study or if we don't learn, then it's not going to be possible to recall mindfulness on that topic at all.
the Denshin Rodan Yabu Shimbaina, and Dembashi Gom, the Dering on the Dembashi Gom in Rojilavana, and Susupigil Den Lamson, Dembashi Gom Shingrasra. Dembashi, Tini Junding, Dembashi Gombaina, and Ninjong Sambada, and Duzuta, any Dunga Poya, Chagdan Poya, and Nimbola Sova, some Daranton language, Denshi Gombaina, any Dunga Pambi Pambadia, Denshi Gombal Den Legre, and Chagdangi Nimbo there, Denshi Gombal Den Legre, Kanji did Samulo, Tava Tamji give you combat there, Denshi Gombal Den Langorasra. But Denshi Gomgoris Lavala, Denshi Moshingorasra.
So in order to generate this recollection, on Pythagoras, we need to become much more familiar and meditate on the content and the meaning behind those Four Noble Truths presentation. So in order to generate thoughts of renunciation, for example, or abandoning suffering, or abandoning the afflictive emotions, attachment, hatred, and so forth, we need to be clear and familiar on the content of those Four Noble Truths. So in that way, we can say that we're meditating and using the antidotes of the Four Noble Truths. So whatever antidote that we are thinking of, that is going to be reducing suffering, attachment, anger, and so forth, then this is necessarily going to be relating to the presentation on the Four Noble Truths. So anything that is related to gaining enlightenment, this is going to be in relation, or can be found in the presentation on the Four Noble Truths. So it's so important to know what that Four Noble Truths content is. That's it.
Yangan do something right. Denshi Shimbaina, any Marigua, Marigual Deni Chagdanki, Chagdangang Lesa, Lela Deni, any Kevale, Keval Deni, any Gevadle, Geval Deni Nawale, Nawal Deni Chivale, two Chin Dungagi, Dunganyon Dangarambadi, Samnale, Sivishu Chayuanji Yungros.
Le, the Gewa, the
Keval Deni, any Geva, Gengo Chad Legro, Gengo Chaval Deni, Nasamamu Legro, Naval Deni, any Shidrogra, Shed Legora, any Keva, Kegan Nachi Dungar said, two, quote unquote, Rambadi, some normal Bessi which I Yungros.
So if we have a clear understanding of what the Four Noble Truths presentation is, then we will be able to understand that on the basis of fundamental ignorance, then attachment, hatred, and other afflictive emotions arise. And then on the basis of that, then karma is accumulated. And on the basis of karma accumulation, then there is birth, and there is, on that basis, there is the aging, and then on that basis, there is sickness, and on that basis of sickness, there is death. And then in this way, we can see the process of the suffering of birth, aging, sickness, and death, and that we cycle in this process of the suffering of birth, aging, sickness, and death. So we're able to develop a very clear understanding of these processes. That's a lot.
There is Yinjim Yungors, the Ra, Nanzu share the Kutangela Deni, Shigiyobadi, Gasagadamas, do some down the share the Manchada, Gango Chaval Deni, Shigorada, Chitangi, Ra, Chitang, Rodanchina, and a Guinea Shidogora, the Ra, Guinea, the machine Rosachi Yomada, she came Mambu Yordina, Manchidi, and a Gango Chani Shidogoras, Ra. Gaya di kala teni chongwara silabana, keval teni gevad chongwara. ro
La.
keval embal deni gengo chagora madu tambun gengo chade jo keval deni gewa ta kewa tia pi ani keval ya gyumamu shojala ta dinding toni ani le ton le wores ta le tia gemegi ni nani zo ta kazo ta ani decha ko ne lambi ta gewa ti ani decha de khal den le wors na mari bal deni ro sumi je namdo di gyumari bal temba mari bal di nelula mungbyong nelula shinjulo de shubyong mari bal ya tu samloji sebu shoji tan yorwas ro
So we really must know about this situation, the fact that it is for sure that due to conditions such as old age and sickness. So in general, we understand that on the basis of becoming old, then usually we pass on or we die. And there is no one that has not gone through this experience. Everyone who has become old has necessarily died. So it's really on this very this basis of even just being born is that we are facing old age, sickness, and death. So on the basis of being born, we're facing the situation of dying. So on this condition of accumulating karma, then we are experiencing birth. So the condition of karma of virtuous and non-virtuous karma, for example, the non-virtuous karma of developing desire attachment, then on that basis of desire and attachment, then we're developing this fundamental ignorance, which is a type of confusion that is misapprehending its object. Yeah. So on this basis, we can see this process very, very clearly. Let's do it.
terda mariba sedi momba nelula mombi wangi mariba shagwarda ro nelu ngontre baina mariba doya di mariba ngado ya di yasi jata madawas ro nelu ngontre ba nelu penada nelu tobi wangi mariba ngaba la deni chagdan gaba la deni chagdan deni kibi le gaba ane le gana legi wangi dungar kewalemba kowala kewan gaba ina ane gewi nganzu lu gen doyagi ane gengo chaya de gaba ane geni rawme shin doya de gaba o dinti le dembe ane karzo da kowa lensu ga rambadi yana chunyi gi rambadi ane ngani ane gobo topsu ga rambadi ya deldini yungo dinti gomba ina ta denshi ro lungjong don gomba lugdog gomba se dindi yungo kanji dindi gomgo gores ro dindi lola ya yang gomba ina ane demba shidi temba la ya nyevar son se di jashi jada ma legres temba la nyevar son ya demba shi gi nesul di temba la susu temben sem na lola ya sebu shu kaddu ina ane pigi gi ane sebu jini shade ya ji yungu yosares ro.
So here we have the ignorance, and the ignorance, which is the confusion that in relation to not clearly and not clearly realizing the actual situation or the nature of reality. So there is a way to reverse this fundamental ignorance. So that reversal is seeing the actual nature of reality, removing that confusion. So due to the ignorance, this fundamental ignorance, if we can reverse that, then the attachment and disturbing afflictive emotions will be removed. Karma or karmic formations will be removed. And in the same way, on that basis, suffering, the birth of birth in cyclic existence or samsara will be reversed, and likewise aging and will be reversed. And then on that basis, that we will not have to experience an uncontrolled time of death. And then, so this we can see that this is what we understand as the 12 links of interdependent origination, yeah? So we can see that this is the cycle of samsara or cyclic existence. So on this, having a clear understanding of these 12 links, then this is actually can come about through our study and reflection on the presentation of the Four Noble Truths. And then if we meditate on the content of this Four Noble Truths presentation, then we will be able to develop very clear understanding and realizations on that basis and be able to develop the mindfulness and recollection of the content of the Four Noble Truths within our mind and use that as a benefit. So,
谢谢芒特斯的。
so I've actually spoken too much the time.
제발은 따로 치스.
If you have any questions, please ask them.
차돌라 콘도 카시다 콘도 제어당나
Atto?
온라인에 미 카시다 미
So
따로 치스.
if people,
내린 잠시하게 있으라.
so if there's anybody online that has any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat box. Otherwise, if there's nobody here that has any questions, we'll leave it here for today. Don't be afraid.
It seems from this talk today that just by abandoning self-cherishing and other going to other cherishing and using mindfulness, that will assure that we will have a human rebirth in our next life. Is that correct?
Okay, so I'll just rephrase the question. So if we abandon self-cherishing and focus solely on cherishing others, then as a result, that will allow us to gain a human rebirth in our future life. Yeah. Okay. So, Geshe, what's her Rangden Shen Zimba Yorwala?
랑다신
Rangden Shen Zimba Ni Rang Zimba Ranghe any Shendengi Zimba Bashik any Gone any Di Kama any Kewachima Amigi Luten Hubgirepe.
야지야 담바.
So for 100%, if we abandon that self-cherishing and focus only on the other cherishing, then it's, Geshe said, that is for sure that we will get the human rebirth in the future life.
랑 진진 길로디 슉첨부 지여봐나. 먼저 착당라 소바 뉴몽 rigdi 기타 슉 담아서나 아니 쇼지마 차르고 여서와스 차르다 먼저 두다다 지 착당 간다 진바이나야 랑 진진을 된 레고라다 착당 간다 진바이나야 랑 진진을 된 레그레스 라 소소 만dig나 소소를 지 연구도나 아니 착발래야 소소를 지 아니 소순 되바여와 가오지다 지 소소든 통바질 얘기도나 먼저 착바기 얘기거래스 소소람 대바 매겨도 소소든 문든 바지 레오나 다만기도 스라 차단기도 디 란친진디 메바이나 차단 야시자도 말레기 말레스 로 차단 메바이나 차단 메바이나 아니 치온디 아니 깨와디 세표온디 차단 그로 메바이나 디 도쇼기 아니 게위기 셈치 게섬지 레고레스 게섬지기 나니 아니 깨와디 제부 잡아이나 아니 깨와 치말내야 디 게섬지기 파온디 인지민이 덴롤이 끼운 그랬다 덴롤이 끼알 도보코로 요 말레스
So when we have very strong self-cherishing attitude, then necessarily those afflictive emotions such as attachment and hatred are going to be arising very strongly. Yeah. So whereas we can think about and on the basis of our cherishing, self-cherishing attitude, when the attachment arises due to a situation that is sort of with the focus of the self, and then likewise the anger that arises that when we meet with conditions that we dislike, the focus is on that self cherishing or preserving situation. Yeah. So that focus is inward on the self. Yeah. So whereas if we consider in the opposite direction, that if we consider in terms of others with the emphasis is more strongly on others, then there'll be less room for those self-cherishing attitudes to arise on the basis of attachment, hatred, and so forth, those afflictive or disturbing emotions. So then at the time of death, if we've got a stronger other cherishing attitude, then at that time of death, we'll be generating a more virtuous type of mind. Yeah. So then on that basis of generating that more virtuous type of mind, then it's a stronger likelihood of achieving a rebirth in the higher realms. That's it.
개와치마 덴롤의 개마지세야디 세디기 셈라야 라리고라스라 세디기 셈라야 안주 류 간다지기 여바이노야 개와치마 덴롤의 개마지기 개바요 마레스라 류당 나글라야 투고마 셈르 투고라스 셈데야 아니 게셈치 게비셈치 로 삼보지기 토니 아니 개와 세디 센드 조바이나 세치마디 개와디 아니 비 치갈라무 셈델야 라리고레스 라 딕비 셈다 미기비 셈다 되차당 콘드슈크 쳔부 토니 딘디지 토니 개와디 조송바이나 개와치마다 nganson le kiya ro keval di ngoras ro tenza ngonni sem ting samban namda ki shen chebal zimbi logic yobayna shen chebal zimbi logic yobayna ani bi chagdang lodi yungmares ro nanzu chagdang logi deadi ran jinjing wang 소소 하장기 찐진기 숙치비 왕기 셴 야와도 란치번 짐비 로디 왕기 간주 샘리야 차당글로 끼고라서 간주 차당글로 가주 숙치와 뒤쪽에 간주 기부메와지 라 간지 로 데부메와지 용도 알아 대차당 콘트로 숙치비 왕기 메시디 아니 기부메와딩 간주 속여버딩 간주 삼당 하고 있다서 내 용야가 쪼디 ranjinjing wang legores ta di ranjinjing di meva songe kabdi rodi lodi karsana jenjinjing lodres
So on this basis of this very life, then in order for us to achieve the rebirth in the higher realms, and it's not actually developed or ordained on our body or speech, but in fact, it is dependent on our own mind. So dependent in terms of having virtuous thoughts. So moving to our future or our next life, the thought at the time of our death, that very last moment before our time of death, that thought needs to be virtuous in order to attain that higher rebirth. Yeah. So whereas if at that moment of death, at that time, the mind has got a very strong afflictive emotions, such as attachment, hatred, and so on, then that will be propelling us or pushing us to the lower realms. Yeah. So if we, during this very lifetime, we have a very pure motivation and a thought of benefiting others, then that much we're having less attachment, less anger and afflictive disturbing emotions. So those disturbing or afflictive emotions are due to that self-grasping attitude. Yeah. So, and when we do have those disturbing emotions and that are due to our self-grasping, then we know from our own experiences that we experience a lot of mental unrest and dissatisfaction. Yeah? So we don't need to think very deeply about that in order to understand. So whereas if we direct our thoughts to others, yeah, then we can see that that self-cherishing attitude, the direct opposite mind, is an other cherishing attitude. That's it.
Dolce, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes,
So
ma'am. We have some questions in the chat.
Okay.
So there's one from Chris. He says, so to activate the subtle mind, can contemplation on any Dharma subject work?
so to activate, okay, subtle mind, can contemplation anyone. So I'll just change that word activate and just make it sort of reveal that subtle mind, thinking about any Dharma subject. Would that work? Yeah. Okay. So Geshe Tsultrim, lo tamo, lo tamo, so chela, and lo tamo ra, lo rapadan tamo ni wala. Lo rapa dang
Lo rakpa, lo.
lo
Yeah,
lo rapadan tamo ni roa.
chamoni,
Ane lo tamo gela, ane nampe chegi jesha dangla bom gyapna hento yurepe.
The yakshu di tirada. Tanda
So,
padura, tanda padun zambali nanglo la ya, lo chamu ge tab yakshu di nambi chemado chongyo mares. Ta mahung bala, tsenri yagin na, ani chikchina, yung sikbaji res. Kakbu dare, dili lagaji, nambi chele lagaji, ani lo chamu ge tabji. Ta yomares. Kansana, nambi chö di tar toon di nguyo netsu kari imba di di rigbegi tooni shego rasara. Nguyo netsu neluk chamu di lo chamu sena ya neluk chamu di tobi lo dela ya lo tashi ngonzengo gres.
that's la.
Di neluk chamu di ani rigbegi tooni sheya di tandabadun ani sanji chamden di chödumadu mewasara. Dinza an lo chamu ngondu gyag tabdi an sanji gi chöle lagaji yomaresti.
So Geshe said that contemplating on Buddhist content or Buddhist Dharma subject is the best way. So actually we can say that within our world, that the method for cultivating our subtle minds, then Buddhism is the best way in order to cultivate those subtle minds. In the future, maybe Geshe thinks that there might be a possibility of, something better coming along, but really, there is no better method for cultivating subtle minds other than the Buddha Dharma. And the reason for that is that the Buddha Shakyamuni is presenting the way that reality exists, the actual nature of reality. So that mind that is seeing directly the actual nature of reality, that is the most subtle mind. So there's no other presentation in the world that describes this level of reality. And a mind that is perceiving this level of reality is necessarily going to be the most subtle level of mind. And the Buddha was the only one, or is the only one, that has made this presentation. So there's nothing other than your Dharma subjects in order to cultivate this subtle mind. That's what
Yes.
Okay, and we have another one from Shan. It says, Geshe last spoke about the need to keep in mind that other people have different points of view, and that's okay. If a relationship is unharmonious and the actions between people are harmful and creating negative karma, it is advisable to remove yourself from that relationship whilst you work on reducing your afflictive states of mind.
So, yes, so I'll just summarize that question. So when there's difficulties in relationships between two or more people, then is it, and those actions are causing harm and negativities, is it best to remove yourself and work on your own afflictive states? Yeah. So, Geshe, so, Mini, Mikashegi Parola, and Gana Teju Sampala, and Susurgi, this Kusim Sam Chene, and Susurgi Samla Ketang Hola, Samla Dana Yagire. Cousin, Yangalapko. Sha, and Mini Giparola, Nyokta, Chung to Sampala. Any pasroni mikiawa dang the ganang tegi ra any tedu sampala any susurang chipo shang ne ra any susugi nyongman la any nyempola shang ha any yaborepe.
Yeah, which comason.
Any sikti
Yeah, patient divorce. Any kanjing on the kanga teondi, kanga mang cheadi, then you may need para kanga cheadi, mintumba choya there was. Jam mintumba, tawa mintumba choya there was. That D Kabdula, and then mintumba D tola some tang devana, yanja some tang devana, and then mintumba droyajmato, and the Yavuchago mares, manchia there was. Hagosa.
the Yankee disabilitada and in michuchote and to be dus rebe.
Yeah, mintumba yongya jiora, the ketchup mintumba, tawa mintumba, mintumba gion, di tone, the truba short rejora.
No,
Mintumba ka yongya di tola yanja and just some down devana. Give us kio mares.
no,
Ah,
let's hear that. So
yanja you control man sagra, kunga dukja jilapson some dianja and some down devana, and then control man sagra. Ah,
So just starting with that if we are in a situation where there is disharmony or in a unharmonious time, then this is arising due to differences in views and opinions, yeah, like we discussed. But if you take yourself away and think about and reflect about those differences again and again, then this is something that is not going to be beneficial, or you're actually making yourself less happy. Yeah, even your own anger might be increasing as you work on reducing your afflictive states of mind. So, get sa any tiwagi nana any susugin yomong kola any samadana yagire.
디 something the yakshirwas. 디 something the yakshirwas. Ada something maduna mintusag mitigi yönden gitolara. Pekün pena midi pe lazy doji bana ko ane ko lazy di korang shika doji re samsan doji. Ine ko yönden jara ko pena ko nangchula gawo yore ko nangchula tona yore ni ko mi thangbu re ane o dinti tad midi yönden kari yoba di tol something baina ane kiba yores. Mintin bikala midi kön kari na kön cancan something de bana ane 소소 간지 소소 마기가 차그레스. 이 자주자다 말했어.
So I mentioned as well, I mentioned to Geshe that focus on your afflictive emotions, remove yourself and focus on those afflictive emotions. And Geshe replied that this is the best thing that you can do in that situation. And Geshe went on to say that if you just focus on the faults, such as the other person being lazy, for example, then this is not going to be of any benefit or make you any happier. Whereas if we look at the good qualities of the other person, instead of looking at their faults, good qualities such as they're got an interest in the Dharma, they study Buddhism, they're a very honest person. If we look at whatever good qualities that the other person has and focus on that, then for sure, then this will be beneficial. Whereas if we focus on the faults of the other person, then for sure, then this will be making our own selves unhappy.
먼저 라므람 갑둘라로 당가 찌질라고 라므람 기 갑둘라 견 체슈디 밀레 견 따야지 가샤 담아선 디레스 소스 짜위 라마라 견 따나 디기요 마레스 미샴발레 견 따나 미샴발레 견 따야지로 라마레 견 따야 촉볼레 견 따야 촉볼레 견 따야 파말레 견 따야 간지 멀레 견 따야 디기 견도 글로 디기 소스레 견 소거레스 가드이나 가와이나 라마라이나 타나장야 초볼라이나 타나지 초몰라이나 파말라이나 아니 연된 따투바이나 아니 소소의 니부 소소의 참부차고 그래서 견데 바이나 소소의 타그르무 차도 디송고도 라마람 나노야 개체슈 디송고도 아스라 견 마다 송야데 베 마스베 개침부진 송고도 라마람라로.
So in the presentation on the Lamrim, or the graduated stages to enlightenment, it is spoken that viewing and focusing on the faults of others is the biggest fault or the biggest mistake. Yeah. So we focus and we point out the faults of our root guru, of our teachers, of our family, friends, and so forth. If we're looking at only the others' faults and not focusing on our own faults, then this is going to be creating a great distance between yourself and the other person. Yeah. So the Lamrim, or the graduated stages to enlightenment, is really emphasizes that looking for faults in others is really a really big mistake. That's it.
Thank you.
That's
Okay, so the final lemrim dedication prayer, page 339. From my 2 types of merit, vast space that I have amassed from working with effort at this practice for a great length of time, may I become the chief leading Buddha for all those whose minds' wisdom eye is blinded by ignorance. Even if I do not reach this state, may I be held in your loving compassion for all lives, Manjushri. May I find the best and complete graded paths of the teachings, and may I please all the Buddhas by my practice. Using skillful means drawn by the strong force of compassion, may I clear the darkness from the minds of all beings. With the points of the path as I have discerned them, may I uphold Buddhist teachings for a very long time. With my heart going out with great compassion, whatever direction the most precious teachings have not yet spread, or once spread have declined, may I reveal this treasure of happiness and aid. May the minds of those who wish for liberation be granted bounteous peace, and the Buddha's deeds be nourished for a long time. By even this greater path to enlightenment completed, due to the wondrous virtuous conduct of the Buddhas and their sons, may all human and non-human beings who eliminate adversity and create conducive conditions for practicing the excellent paths never be parted in any of their lives in the purest path praised by the Buddhas. Whenever someone makes effort to act in accordance with the tenfold Mahayana virtuous practices, may they always be assisted by the mighty ones, and may oceans of prosperity spread everywhere.